My sister-in-law tried to make my wedding about her, so I gave her the microphone. If you told me a year ago that my wedding would end with my sister-in-law dramatically sobbing into a microphone while guests stared in horror, I would have laughed. But now? I'm just grateful I saw the signs early, even if I ignored them at first. I met Joshua 2 years ago at a networking event for creatives in the city. I was there for the wine and business cards. He was dragged in by a friend. He was warm, unpretentious, and had this gentle way of listening that made you feel like the only person in the room. We started dating a week later. Within 6 months, I was in love. The kind that makes you start picturing shared grocery lists and duplicate sets of keys. And then I met Ava. It started innocently. I was making pasta in my small but cozy apartment, stirring sauce while Joshua leaned against the counter reading out loud from a ridiculous Reddit thread. He paused mid-sentence. "By the way," he said, "I was thinking, it's time you met my family." I turned around, spoon in hand. "Yeah? Yeah. Maybe this weekend? Ava's flying in." I smiled, wiping my hands on a towel. "Sounds great." Joshua's family lived about 45 minutes away, in one of those leafy suburbs where all the mailboxes match and lawns are suspiciously perfect. His mom, Susan, greeted me at the door in a cashmere sweater, all polite warmth and practiced smiles. She gave me a once-over that I tried not to notice. And then came the whirlwind. "Ava," Susan called upstairs. "They're here." Footsteps thundered. And then a tall brunette, maybe 30, all bronzer and dramatic scarves, launched herself down the stairs and practically tackled Joshua. "Joshy," she squealed, arms wrapped tight around his neck. "You shaved your beard. You know I loved that thing." He laughed awkwardly, patting her back. "It was getting patchy, Ava." She turned to me without letting go. "You must be Evelyn. Wow. You're shorter than I pictured." I smiled tightly. "Nice to meet you." At dinner, Ava took control like it was her stage. Every story somehow circled back to her. Her job, her ex, her travels. If someone complimented the roast chicken, Ava would chime in. "Remember, Josh? The one time I tried to make chicken and nearly set the kitchen on fire?" She'd laugh, and everyone else would follow. At one point, I tried to share a story about Joshua helping me fix a client presentation last minute. "He's amazing with visuals," I said, reaching for my water. Ava didn't miss a beat. "Oh, of course. In high school, he used to make all my posters for student council. Remember Josh? That big one with the glitter?" Joshua chuckled, shooting me an apologetic look. And then, the moment that really got me. Susan poured wine, and Ava leaned back in her chair, grinning. "You know, I'm not even sure anyone will ever love you the way I do, Josh," she said, raising her glass. Silence. Then Joshua laughed a little too loudly and said, "Well, that's comforting," trying to brush it off. I tried to smile, but something in me curled inward. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she looked at me after, like she was daring me to argue. Later that night, back in my apartment, I asked him gently, "Is Ava always like that?" He shrugged. "She's just intense. She means well. It's always been the two of us, you know." After Dad died, she kind of took over the big sibling role. I nodded, even as my stomach nodded. I didn't say what I was really thinking, that her big sibling role felt a little too possessive. That night, I lay in bed next to Joshua, wide awake. His arm was draped over me, soft breaths even against my neck, but my mind kept circling back to Ava's voice. "I'm not even sure anyone will ever love you the way I do." It wasn't jealousy. It was something deeper, a sense that this woman had claimed him and wasn't planning to let go. And I had a growing feeling that if I didn't start setting boundaries, she might just try to rewrite the entire story of us, starting with our wedding. Planning a wedding should be stressful in the charming, Pinterest, fail kind of way. A wrong shade of ivory, a florist that ghosts you, someone's drunk uncle. Not this. I was sipping a lukewarm latte in a local cafe, my wedding binder spread out in front of me like a battleground. Across from me sat my best friend, Chris. Bold lipstick, sharper tongue, and the kind of stare that made waiters nervous. "She texted you again?" Chris raised an eyebrow, thumbing through a page of notes. "What is she now? Your wedding planner / emotional warden." I sighed and showed her my phone. Ava's message lit up the screen. I know it's your day, but remember, this is about family. Maybe consider a more classic look, something with sleeves? Chris snorted. She wants you to look like a rejected extra from Little House on the Prairie. She says it's a family tradition. Her mom wore long sleeves. Her grandmother, too. Did they all marry the same man? I laughed, but the knot in my stomach was growing tighter by the day. It started with little things. Comments about the venue. Passive-aggressive suggestions about the guest list. Questions like, do you think your friends will feel comfortable around our older relatives? Translation, why are there so many of your people on the list? At first, I tried to be graceful. I smiled. I thanked her for her input. I vented to Chris in long, emoji-heavy texts. Then came the dress appointment. I stood on the pedestal, surrounded by mirrors in the bridal boutique. The gown I wore shimmered softly in the light, off-shoulder, elegant, with just enough drama in the train to feel like I was stepping into a dream. My mom loved it. Chris gave it a dramatic, approving whistle. And then Ava walked in. Late, of course. Oh, wow, she said, slowly circling me like a shark in a Chanel scarf. It's bold. It's the one I love, I said carefully. I just wonder if Josh's side of the family will find it a bit much. She smiled tightly. I mean, I know you're not used to our traditions. I stepped off the pedestal. Josh said he loves this one. He was excited when I showed him the silhouette. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But this day isn't just about you, Evelyn. It's about joining families. You want to be part of the family, right? That night, I found myself pacing in our apartment, still in my sweatpants, wedding binder tossed on the couch. Joshua was cooking, or rather burning, something that was once chicken. I feel like she's trying to plan the whole wedding, I said, arms folded. Like she wants to make sure every part of it reflects her version of family values. Joshua wiped his hands and turned to me. I know. I'll talk to her again. You've said that before. She gets carried away. She's emotional. You know how she is. Do I? I shot back, then sighed. Josh, I'm trying so hard to be respectful. But I'm not marrying Ava, I'm marrying you. And I don't want to feel like a guest at my own wedding. He hesitated, then reached for my hand. Just be patient with her, okay? It's only a few more weeks. She's coming from a good place. I nodded, but only because I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. The real slap came at our engagement party. It was supposed to be a casual gathering at a friend's rooftop lounge. Soft lights, drinks, hugs, the whole warm and fuzzy vibe. Until Ava tapped her glass. I know this is about Evelyn and Josh, she said, standing in the center like she'd been waiting for stage lights to hit her. But I wanted to say something. Everyone quieted. I wasn't going to bring this up, she said dramatically, placing a hand on her stomach. But I may be, well, I think I might be pregnant. Murmurs spread through the room. Joshua looked like someone had just thrown a pie in his face. My hand tightened around my wine glass. I haven't told the father yet, she continued. It's early. But I felt this was the right moment. What moment? Our moment? An hour later, after she'd soaked up all the attention and someone had found her ginger ale just in case, Ava pulled me aside near the elevator. I hope I didn't steal your thunder, she said, smiling sweetly. I stared at her. You didn't hope. You planned? Her expression didn't even twitch. You should get used to sharing the spotlight, Evelyn. That's what real family is. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Later that night, back at the cafe with Chris, I told her the whole story. She stirred her coffee with dramatic fury. I know you love him, Chris said. But are you sure you want to be part of this family? I looked down at my ring. The sparkle caught the light, but it didn't feel quite as bright. I'm not sure, I whispered. But I think I need to find out before I walk down that aisle. The morning of my wedding, I woke up with a knot in my stomach the size of a grapefruit. I stared at the ceiling of the hotel suite, listening to the faint hum of the city below. My dress was hanging near the window, delicate and glowing in the early light. The dress I chose despite all of Ava's passive-aggressive comments. Despite the sleeves debate. Despite everything. You're quiet, Chris said, curling another strand of my hair. I feel like something's going to go wrong, I admitted, watching her through the mirror. Chris met my eyes in the reflection and smirked. Girls, something already went wrong. Her name is Ava. But you? You're gonna look like the queen you are. Breathe, smile. And remember, this is your day. I exhaled, trying to shake the anxiety. The room buzzed with soft chatter, makeup brushes flicking, the faint clink of mimosas. My bridesmaids were laughing in the corner, flipping through the printed schedule for the day. And then, like some cursed wind had shifted, the atmosphere changed. She's here, someone whispered. Chris turned toward the door. What do you mean she's... Oh, hell no. Ava swept into the suite like she owned it. Hair perfectly curled, lipstick subtle but flawless, and a smug little smile that said she knew exactly what she was doing. But it was the dress that hit me like a slap. Ivory. A long, elegant gown with a modest neckline and lace sleeves, not technically white, but close enough to make every single person in the room blink twice. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought she was the bride. Oh wow, Ava, one of my bridesmaids said awkwardly. I know, Ava beamed. I just wanted to feel special, you know? And this shade was so flattering on me. It's not white, it's cream. Totally different. Chris muttered, yeah? And arsenic's totally different from bleach, too. I clenched my jaw and smiled the tightest smile of my life. Lovely. Thanks for coming early. Oh, I wanted to see my girl before everything started. She glided over and touched my arm like we were best friends. You look nice. A little shiny maybe, but that can be fixed. Chris physically turned away and made a strangled sound. Ava left soon after, saying she had to help the groomsmen with corsages, whatever that meant. The moment she walked out, I finally exhaled. Chris stood behind me, adjusting the veil. She's not going to stop. You know that, right? Yeah, I said quietly. But she's not taking today from me. Not this. The ceremony went beautifully. Despite everything, the moment I walked down the aisle and saw Joshua's eyes, warm, tear-filled, real, I remembered why I was here. For him. For us. Even if it meant tolerating the mess that came attached to his last name. But the reception? That was Ava's playground. From the moment we walked into the banquet hall, she was everywhere, floating from table to table, hugging people like she was the guest of honor, laughing louder than anyone else, inserting herself into every photo, leaning into shots of me and Josh like it was a family reunion, not a wedding. At one point, I was trying to take a quiet picture with my college friends, just the girls, and Ava practically dove in with her champagne flute. Come on, she chirped. It's not a party without me. And people laughed. Because what else do you do with someone like her? But the moment that really turned my stomach happened just before the toasts. Joshua and I had just taken our seats. The cake was cut, the lights dimmed slightly, and the DJ called for everyone to raise a glass. Chris was supposed to go first. She was already holding her glass, standing by the mic, ready to deliver the dry, sarcastic, heartwarming speech I'd heard her rehearse 3 times. And then I saw Ava, standing, champagne in hand, eyes locked on the microphone like it had called her name from across the room. She started walking toward it, slowly, dramatically, the soft train of her ivory dress trailing behind her like a second act waiting to happen. I froze. So did Chris. Ava reached the mic, glanced back at Josh, who looked confused but not entirely surprised, and then smiled at the crowd. Oh, I'm sorry, she said sweetly. I just wanted to say a few words before everyone gets too emotional. You know how I get. And right then, I felt something shift in my chest. Something cold. Something final. Because I realized in that moment, Ava wasn't just overstepping. She was rehearsing. She'd been preparing for this moment. Not my moment, hers, since the day I met her. And I knew in the seconds before she spoke that whatever came out of her mouth next would be more about her than about us. But instead of stopping her, I sat back in my chair, and I waited. Because sometimes, the best way to reveal someone's true self is to give them the microphone. The clinking of glasses filled the reception hall as the lights dimmed slightly, casting a warm golden hue over the tables. For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. Soft music, soft laughter, and the scent of roses and champagne. The toasts had begun. First came my father. He stood tall, in the suit I helped him pick out, clearing his throat nervously before beginning. His voice wavered at first, but then steadied with every word. When Evelyn was little, he said, his eyes glistening, She once told me she didn't want to get married because no one would ever love her as much as I do. A few people laughed. I blinked quickly. But now, he continued, his voice catching just slightly, I see someone who looks at her like she's the whole world. And I know I'm not losing a daughter. I'm gaining a son. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Joshua reached under the table and squeezed my hand gently. The guests applauded, some dabbing their eyes. Then came Chris. She practically danced to the microphone, raising her glass before she even said a word. Okay, she said with a smirk. First of all, I was told I have 2 minutes, but I talk fast, so buckle up. Laughter. I've known Evelyn since college. I've seen her stressed over exams, running late to job interviews, and once cry for 3 hours over a broken printer. She paused. But I've never seen her give up on anything she believed in, including love. More laughter, more smiles. Then Chris's tone softened. You're the kind of woman who makes people better by just existing in their lives. And Joshua, if you ever forget that, I know where you live. The room burst into laughter again, and I couldn't help but laugh too, through tears. She winked at me and handed off the mic. It was perfect. Real. Joyful. Then Ava stood up. The chatter dropped almost instantly. People looked toward her table, then at me. I smiled, politely, tightly, and nodded, giving her permission she didn't need. She took the mic with a delicate hand, eyes wide and misty, like she'd just been crowned prom queen. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, she began. But I realized I had to. The silence was loaded. Ava stood in the soft spotlight, clutching her champagne flute, then turned slowly toward Joshua. I've known you my whole life, she said, her voice trembling, or pretending to tremble. You were my first best friend, my constant, my second half. I went cold. She didn't look at me. Not once. From building pillow forts to sneaking out to watch meteor showers, to keeping secrets we never told anyone else. I always knew you were special. Some guests exchanged glances. Ava laughed softly, almost wistfully. I guess I thought we'd always belong to each other in some way. And now, I have to let you go. She turned to the audience for the first time. It's hard. Watching someone you love become someone else's. Her voice cracked, conveniently, right on cue. But, if someone has to take my place, she said, her eyes landing on me for a beat too long, I'm glad it's her. A pause. Then a smile. Too wide. Too sweet. She's strong and quiet and patient. That's important. More pauses. Too many. The applause was hesitant, scattered. A few people murmured things like how sweet and what a bond they have, but most just shifted uncomfortably. Joshua looked stunned. Not embarrassed, not exactly, but unsure. Like he didn't know if he should comfort me or her. Susan, of course, was dabbing her eyes like she'd just watched a Nicholas Sparks film. That was beautiful, she whispered loudly to someone at the next table. She has such a pure heart. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Chris leaned closer and murmured, What the hell was that? A toast or a breakup? I gave her a shaky smile. Inside, I felt hollow, like I was watching someone else's reception. Like I'd walked into the wrong hall, sat down at the wrong table, and found myself in a celebration where I didn't quite belong. Ava returned to her seat with a sigh, as though she'd just done something difficult, noble. She caught my eye briefly, and gave a tiny, triumphant smile, subtle enough that no one else would notice. But I did. Because I knew what it meant. Her speech wasn't for Joshua, and it certainly wasn't for me. It was for everyone else. She had planted the seed, the idea that they were more than cousins, more than siblings, more than family. And now that seed would grow in people's minds, watered by suspicion, fertilized by gossip. And what could I do? Get angry? I'd look jealous. Call her out? I'd seem insecure. Ignore it? Then she wins. I sat back, forcing a smile as people raised their glasses once again. A camera flashed. Someone called out to love. And all I could think was, I may have said I do today. But I wasn't the only woman claiming Joshua. The air felt heavier than the chandelier hanging above the room. The applause from Ava's toast had already died down, but the tension? That still hovered like smoke. I pushed back my chair. Chris looked at me, her eyebrow raised as if silently asking, "Are you about to do what I think you are?" Yes, I was. I walked toward Ava, each step echoing louder than it should have in a room full of stunned silence. She looked up, eyes wide, like a child caught mid-performance who still believes the spotlight belongs to her. I smiled. Tight, cold, controlled. "Clearly," I said, my voice ringing out over the stunned crowd. "You want all eyes on you tonight?" She blinked, pretending confusion. "So here," I continued, holding out my hand. "Take the mic." She didn't move. I stepped closer and gently pressed the microphone into her palm. "You've earned it," I said softly. "Spotlight's yours." Then I turned, walked back to my table and sat. My heart was racing, but my face was calm. I sipped my champagne like I had all night, like none of this touched me, like I wasn't dying a little inside. Ava stood frozen, mic in hand, torn between fake humility and the thrill of unexpected stage time. She chose the latter. She cleared her throat. "Well, I didn't plan to say more, but since Evelyn was kind enough to offer..." She gave a theatrical laugh, glancing around the room. Chris murmured, "Here we go," loud enough only for me to hear. Ava's smile grew. "You all know I'm not great with words," she began, falsely modest, but what I said earlier, it barely scratched the surface. She took a breath and looked right at Joshua. "There were times growing up," she said, "when I honestly thought God gave me a soulmate in advance. Just," she placed a hand on her heart, "packaged as my brother." A few people gasped. One woman coughed loudly. A man near the bar actually whispered, "What the hell?" Ava pressed on. "I know how it sounds, but feelings don't always come in clean little boxes. I loved him, differently, deeper." She laughed nervously, though her eyes sparkled with something disturbingly close to satisfaction. "There were moments, and I'll just say it, when I wished he wasn't my brother, because then maybe..." She trailed off, letting the implication hang like a noose. I heard someone mutter, "Oh my God." A guest at the back, a distant cousin I think, got up and left. Others began shifting uncomfortably, whispering. Ava barely noticed. "Every time he dated someone," she continued, voice shaking with practiced vulnerability, "I felt like I was losing a part of myself. I tried to smile, to support him. But inside, it felt like betrayal." She turned dramatically to the crowd. "Have you ever loved someone so much that you resented every person who touched their hand?" I looked at Joshua. He wasn't breathing. His jaw was slack, his hands limp in his lap. Susan sat 2 tables over, eyes wide in horror, hands clamped over her mouth like she could physically stop the words from pouring out of Ava. Too late. The dam had broken. "I know it's wrong," Ava said, almost whispering now. "I know what people will think, but I had to say it. Because if I kept pretending I was okay, if I stood here smiling like this was just another wedding," she sniffled, theatrically, deliberately, "then I'd be lying to myself. And to him." Joshua finally moved. He stood slowly, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping dragon. "Ava," he began, voice hoarse. She turned to him, hopeful, expectant, but he didn't say more. He just stood there, stunned, and turned to face the guests instead. He started again. I didn't know she felt that way. No one did. Certainly not me." The silence was brutal now. Even the waitstaff had frozen. Chris leaned in, voice low and dry. "Do we clap now, or call an exorcist?" I didn't laugh. Couldn't. Because this wasn't just awkward. It was dangerous. Ava had taken my wedding, my marriage, and bent it into her own twisted theater. And worst of all, she wasn't embarrassed. She was glowing. Another couple stood and quietly made their way to the door. 2 more followed. Whispers turned into quiet outrage. Ava finally seemed to register it. Her voice trembled for real now. "I didn't mean to make this about me. I needed to say it." Joshua sat down. Hard. Like his knees gave out. Susan was crying now, face in her hands, too overwhelmed to speak. And I sat perfectly still. Because that's what you do when a storm rips through your house, and you don't want to give it the satisfaction of seeing you flinch. Ava lowered the mic slowly, like she was just now realizing she hadn't saved the party. She detonated it. She looked at me. For the first time that night, she looked scared. I tilted my head, smiled faintly, and raised my glass. To the bride, I said softly. Whoever she turns out to be. An hour had passed. The music still played, soft and out of place now, like a forgotten playlist no one had the nerve to turn off. The banquet hall was mostly empty, chairs pushed back in strange angles, half-filled glasses abandoned like the people who'd left them. The once golden room now felt pale and bruised. I stood near the exit, clutching my small purse with white knuckles, when I heard Joshua's voice behind me. Evelyn, wait. I didn't turn around, not yet. He stepped closer. I didn't know she was going to say those things, he said quickly, breathless, like he'd run from across the room. I swear. I'm just as shocked as you are. I finally turned. His tie was loosened, his hair a mess, not in a sexy, charming way like in movies, but in the real, desperate way of a man watching his whole foundation crack. I looked at him, and I didn't flinch. She just said out loud what I've known for a long time, I said, calm as glass. He frowned, confused. What do you mean? That she's in love with you, I replied, my voice steady. That she sees me as a threat, that this family, your mother included, never planned to let me have you. Not really. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I stepped past him, toward the doors. That's when I heard the sharp clack of heels behind me. Ava. Her cheeks were streaked with mascara, hair wild from running her hands through it too many times. Her heels wobbled slightly, but her eyes were burning with fury. You humiliated me, she spat. I blinked, stunned by the lack of irony. She marched up, hands trembling. You made me look insane in front of everyone. I didn't make you say anything, I said coldly. You held the mic. She turned to Joshua. You're just going to let her speak to me like that? After everything? Joshua didn't move. His silence was louder than her hysteria. Ava turned back to me, voice sharp. You knew I wasn't okay, and you let me talk. You wanted this to happen. I narrowed my eyes. You made yourself the main character. I just gave you the stage you were already dancing on. You ruined everything. She shouted. That's when Susan finally appeared, lips thin with frustration, her clutch bag clutched like a weapon. Evelyn, she snapped. You could have handled this with more grace. I turned to her, eyebrows raised. She's his sister, Susan continued. She was emotional. Weddings bring out complicated feelings. She was confessing romantic love for her brother, I said sharply. Not complicated, inappropriate. Susan took a breath, as if trying to find her moral footing. You could have diffused the situation. Instead, you escalated it. Escalated it? I laughed once, dry, humorless. She called him her soulmate. She said she wished he weren't her brother. She called me a placeholder. And I escalated it? Susan crossed her arms. You're his wife now. That comes with responsibilities. This is your new family. You should have been more careful. I felt something shift in my chest, a final thread snapping. No, I said clearly. My family is not a woman who cries when her brother gets married. It's not a mother who tells me to be careful instead of telling her daughter to get help. I turned to Joshua. My family, I said, will be made of people who know the difference between love and obsession, between support and control, between closeness and codependence. His eyes dropped. I'm done pretending this dynamic is normal, I added, my voice rising slightly. I'm done making room for Ava. And I'm done letting you all tell me how to behave while she spirals. A long pause. The kind that comes before someone breaks or someone walks away. This time, I walked. Chris had been waiting just outside, leaning against the wall with a cigarette she hadn't lit. She raised an eyebrow as I stepped into the night. Well, she said, slipping it back into her bag. That went better than expected. I let out a shaky laugh. The cold air felt like truth. Are you okay? She asked, more softly now. No, I replied. But I'm clear. Behind me, the doors stayed shut. I imagined Susan pacing, Ava crying louder, Joshua sitting somewhere, still trying to figure out who he disappointed most. His sister or his wife. And I was already leaving that stage. No more competing for a mic that should have never been passed around in the first place. I didn't marry into a family. I escaped one. The silence of my apartment was a stark contrast to the chaos of the banquet hall just a few hours before. The walls, painted a calm shade of dove gray, offered no judgment as I sank into my worn couch, sipping black coffee that had gone cold far too quickly. The faint hum of the city outside reminded me that life was still moving forward, without the drama, without the spectacle. Chris sat beside me, her expression a mix of concern and quiet approval. She had been my rock through all this madness, the sarcastic voice in the storm. "So," she said, flipping through her phone, "Ava's already started her social media crusade. You've got to see this." I took the phone, scrolling through the flood of posts and stories. Ava's face was everywhere, poised and polished, but her words were venomous. Betrayed by a stranger in my own family. Our family torn apart by an outsider's ambition. When you think you're gaining a sister, but instead you lose a family. The captions were dripping with false heartbreak, but underneath, they were clear accusations, aimed squarely at me. I sighed. Classic Ava. Chris snorted. She's got a talent for drama. Think she's angling for pity points or a sympathy following? Probably both, I said, setting the phone down. But honestly, I'm not interested in playing her game. We sat for a moment, the quiet punctuated only by the soft tapping of fingers on screens, the occasional sip of lukewarm coffee. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A message from Joshua. "Can we talk? Please." I stared at it. For a moment, I debated ignoring it altogether, but Chris gave me a look that said, "You don't have to play the hero." So I replied, "All right. When and where?" We met later that afternoon at the little cafe down the street, the one with the cracked tiles and baristas who knew my order by heart. Joshua arrived looking worn, the lines around his eyes deepened by days of stress. He didn't waste time with small talk. "I'm sorry, Evelyn, for everything." His voice was low, earnest. "I messed up. I didn't know how to handle Ava, how to manage all this. And I made things worse by not standing up to her." I studied him carefully. "You didn't stand up because you were afraid. Afraid of losing your family? Afraid of the fallout?" He nodded, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Yeah, maybe. But I want to make it right. I want us to be okay." I took a breath. "Joshua, you made your choice the moment you let Ava turn the wedding into her personal drama. You chose your family, not me. And that's okay." His mouth twitched, but he didn't argue. "That doesn't mean I hate you," I said softly. "It just means I need to protect myself now." He reached out, but I stepped back, holding up a hand. "We can figure out the practical stuff," I added. "Sign the papers, split the accounts. No drama, no public scenes, just closure." Joshua nodded slowly. "Okay." A week later, the divorce papers were signed quietly, without tears or shouting. A mutual agreement sealed with professional calmness. No more theatrics. No more accusations. Just the end of a chapter. Sitting back in my apartment after the meeting, I felt a strange weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was simply done. Chris came over later that evening, bringing a bottle of wine and an infectious grin. "To new beginnings," she toasted. To knowing when to say enough, I replied. We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from surviving a storm and realizing you're still standing. In the days that followed, I found myself scrolling through social media less and less. Ava's posts had slowed, her audience divided between sympathy seekers and cynics who saw through her act. Friends messaged me with support and quiet admiration for how I handled everything. I started thinking about what a wedding really was. It's supposed to be about love, right? A celebration of two people committing to a shared future. But it's also about boundaries, about recognizing who belongs in your life and who doesn't, about standing firm when those lines are crossed. I realized that my wedding day wasn't just a beginning, it was a lesson. A brutal, public lesson in resilience and self-respect. And as I brewed my morning coffee one bright, quiet day, I smiled, because I was ready. Ready for what came next. The garden was alive with soft laughter, the scent of blooming roses mingling with the summer air. Twinkling fairy lights hung between the trees, casting a warm glow over the gathering. I stood near the edge of the crowd, watching the bride and groom, so clearly in love, exchange tender glances. It was a scene I hadn't been able to fully appreciate on my own wedding day. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves as I smiled quietly to myself. Then, a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Hey, you're that girl with the microphone, aren't you?" I turned to see a woman from the wedding party, curious but friendly. "Yes," I replied with a small laugh. "I just gave her the microphone. Everything else? She did all the talking herself." She raised her eyebrows, amused. "That was some performance." I shrugged. Sometimes the strongest choice isn't to fight or shout over someone. Sometimes it's just letting people speak, and letting the truth shout itself out. The woman nodded thoughtfully, then drifted back toward the celebration. I took a deep breath and glanced again at the happy couple, their smiles bright against the darkening sky. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. Because the microphone had been mine all along.